I have a peer group that I get wisdom from. I have a business coach. We run our business on EOS. So all those things really helped us, get better and improve and look ahead.
This is the Staying Power Podcast, a show that explores the challenges business owners face as they grow. I'm Brandon Hall.
And I'm Thomas Castelli.
And together we ask the tough questions to show you that running a business is not for the faint of heart. But if you have staying power, you'll overcome your challenges and achieve lasting success.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Staying Power Podcast. Brandon Hall and I are joined by Don Maranca, founder of JDSM Enterprises, a coaching company where they help small business owners implement the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, in order to create a holistic system for running their business. In today's episode, we discuss why Don decided to start his business, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, the three key aspects of business systems, which include people, process, and infrastructure, the challenges Don faced along the way, and much more. Don, thanks so much for taking the time to come on to the show today. Would you be able to give our listeners a little information on your background?
Oh, wow. Okay, background, pretty varied. So thanks for having me here. So my background after graduating college is I went straight into public accounting. So one of the big 8 accounting firms back then, Arthur Andersen. And from there, really stuck in public accounting for about 5 years. But going into public accounting, I wasn't going to be a lifer and be a partner. That was just part of my plan to get a lot of business knowledge. And so from there, I moved to, that was in Dallas. And I moved back to Austin where I went to school and started working for big firms over there, Fortune 100 companies like Dell Computers and Applied Materials. So I wore financially related hats, accounting hats. But also once I got to Applied Materials, which is a semiconductor industry, I started wearing more of an operational hat. So was looking at process improvements, measurements, scorecard, got into lean manufacturing type stuff, got into inventory management. And so after big business, I was getting burned out of corporate. So I decided to go work for smaller businesses. And so I wore the hats of the COO, CFO hats, Director of Finance, Director of Operations hats. And that's really where I fell in love with business and kind of found my passion for working in small business, working hand in hand with the owners and really making the impact and creating the culture that I could help impact in the smaller world. And that's where I just love working in small business. And that's where I decided to have my own business. And that's how I started my own company back in 2010, first by buying a franchise called the Alternative Board, which is a peer board model and coaching model. We probably get into that a little bit more. And then after that, then that's strictly for the business owner. And then I added another service offering called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, in 2015, which helped me get a layer below the owners and work with the leadership teams so they can get more from their business. And really, that's my main focus these past few years is TAB and EOS. And that kind of brings you up to speed on kind of my career path there.
Very interesting. So JDSM Enterprises, that's the business where you coach people.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. So it's the parent company that houses my franchise, TAB, the Alternative Board, and also where I house EOS. And I didn't know I was going to use that name. I just needed some name to put the franchise as doing business as the Alternative Board. But when we were looking for a name, we decided on JDSM because when we started the business, my son was 1 year old and his initials are JDSM. So his name's Jake Donato Shai Maranca. And so that's how we ended up with JDSM Enterprises, which is funny because when I tell him, hey, Jake, the business named after you, and it didn't really connect with him until I told him, Jake, what's the business name for a Batman? Batman's business name. He says, oh, Wayne Enterprises. Oh, okay, now I get it. So finally connected with him.
No, for sure. I mean, definitely an interesting way to come up with a name. So when you first started JDSM Enterprises, how did you know that then when you started the business was the right time to do it?
I didn't know until I really reflected on it because back then I jumped from job to job, but I would probably stay about 3 years in one company. I worked really hard, did well, went up the chain, went up the ranks, but it wasn't fulfilling for me in terms of, I didn't feel like I was where I'm supposed to be for a bigger purpose. I knew I was supposed to be there at that point in time. So I jumped from different places, and every experience was great, opened up new doors and things like that. Till my last jump, which moved us from Austin to San Antonio. And I took a job here with a risk knowing that I may butt heads with the owner. And that's exactly what happened. And so we always butted heads. And then, after a year of working there, it just wasn't working out. I knew that I probably wasn't going to last there long. Either she was going to fire me or I was going to quit because I was miserable. And so I started looking at different things that I'm supposed to be doing. So she did eventually fire me. So that was a humbling experience, but it was just a blessing in disguise because at that time we had just moved to our new home here in San Antonio, and we brought my wife's family over. We actually built houses right next to each other, and my son was just 1 year old at that time. And I just turned 40 that year. So it seemed like everything was crashing down, and it was just a big crisis in my mind because we moved down here and all of a sudden this job didn't work out, and we significantly upgraded our home. So we had a big mortgage now at this time, and we now have a son. And so I was having somewhat of a midlife crisis at that time. And so when I did start looking for, what does God have planned for me now? I started thinking really deep and started praying, reading books. And that's when I started realizing that a lot of the things I was doing was just really stepping stones for me to get to where I need to be and where I wanted to be. And 3 years ago, before I bought the alternative board, prior to that, I saw this peer model. So if y'all are not familiar with the alternative board, it's like EO, YPO, Vistage, C12. So we come together as business owners on a monthly basis and get peer advice. And there's also a coaching component to it. So one of the franchisors approached me when I was in Austin. It was called CEO Focus at that time. And I was interested in that model. I said, wow, that's interesting. I'd like to do that sometime. And so we spoke, and he thought I could help develop the Austin market. But I said, that sounds very enticing, but I'm not ready for that yet. And so fast forward 3 years later, after I got fired, I started thinking, well, maybe it's time to revisit that model again because I really like it. And so I found who existed here in San Antonio, and it was the alternative board. They had a huge market presence here. And I started talking with the owner there, and eventually I bought part of his business. And that's kind of how that transpired. But it did start connecting all the dots, wondering, I'm very broad in my knowledge base because of all the experiences I've had, but I'm not really deep in any one specific expertise or specialty. So it helped me really understand the business owners from a lot of different perspectives. And I think that's what helped me do well with the alternative board when I first launched it 10 years ago.
So where's your business at today? How many employees do you have, and what does your service to your clients look like? So
we have 3 official full-time employees, and I have 2 contractors that are facilitators and coaches for me that help me run my other groups. And business is doing really well. I mean, we've grown a lot in this past year and over the last 10 years, but it wasn't always like that. I mean, the first 3 years since I moved us to San Antonio, I didn't have a huge network here, circle of influence. And so my network was in Austin. And so I had to build my credibility up here locally, even though I bought a business. That's why I decided to buy an existing business, because the brand was already established here. It's just a matter of me really getting to know my community here and creating some influence. And that took about 3 years. And so the first 3 years, I really didn't pay myself. I sunk everything back into the business, because when I bought the business, I bought existing groups, existing clients, and I bought that from the original franchisee. And a lot of my money was going out to pay him. Money was going out to the franchisor, Tab Corporate. And the rest of it, I was just sinking back into marketing and doing things to make sure I stood out there. And so for the first 3 years, thank goodness my wife had a full-time job. Otherwise, we would have been really struggling. So she allowed me to really take my time to establish a market presence here. And then I started paying myself. And then that's when I started venturing into other consulting work, and I started doing more strategic planning type stuff. But I wanted to have my own model, because I knew working with a business owner, they would still struggle implementing strategy across the whole entire organization. Okay. And I didn't really see anything that I liked in terms of strategy and implementation. So I started creating my own model back in, 2014. But then I read the book Traction. I read the book Traction in 2015. And as if y'all have read that before, Gino Wickman's philosophy is so aligned with mine, because I knew he was influenced with Pat Lencioni, Jim Collins, Vern Harnish, Stephen Covey. So all these people I would read and follow, he read and followed as well. So once I read Traction, everything just kind of made sense. Like, oh, it's all there. So all the tools that I've used already, it's all there. It's just, he's got the framework to use it so that it makes sense and you gain traction when you actually follow that process and using the tools. And so in 2015, I decided to become a professional EOS implementer. And now I'm a certified EOS implementer, which is a step higher than the professional designation. And that has really skyrocketed my business since 2015. And we're very blessed to, last year, 2019, we bought our own building. We bought a commercial property, which has always been one of my visions. And we're officing out of there now. We have some tenants and we have a session room, where I'm talking to you guys right now in our session room. So business has been great. This COVID thing has been a little bit of a hiccup, but you can't complain. Business is still great. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. What do you find is the most, if you had to pick like the single most challenge that business owners need to face, what would that be? And is there a simple solution that they're just not connecting with?
Wow, that's a big question. So there's a lot of challenges, and it really depends on what stage they are in their business, and also what stage they are in their maturity in running that business as a leader. Because in the beginning, I think they can do everything, and they try to do everything, and they have a certain way of doing it, and they think they do it best. So it's hard for them to let go of things. So as they grow, they have to learn how to delegate and elevate, and really have trust and faith that other people will do what's best. So I think that's one of the challenges as they're growing. And then after that is once they keep growing and they've actually have a team that's helping them grow, it's developing a leadership team within that team so that they can actually let go even more, because now they have to place trust on their leadership team's ability to delegate and elevate. And so that's a challenge for them as well. So I think those are probably the biggest things, because usually when I'm working with clients from an EOS standpoint, and even through TAB, when we talk about issues in the board meetings, a lot of it's people related. People related in terms of their own personal development as a leader, or whether it's developing lower level staff or developing their leadership team so that they can succeed and step back from the business more and more. So it's that. Really communicating. So part of it's the people side of things, but the other side of it is really clearly communicating what their vision is from the business and how they're going to get there, because it's usually in their head, but they're not necessarily sharing it with people. And so they get frustrated because they don't understand why their team or employees are not aligned with their vision or doing the things that are consistent with their vision. And it's typically because they haven't shared it. And it's still just in their head, or they assume that people know about it, but it's a wrong assumption because they haven't clearly articulated it in a compelling way to their team.
Why does it matter if my employees know what my vision is or not? Why is that a big deal?
Well, especially now these days, everyone wants to know why. Okay, so why? What's the purpose behind it? What's in it for me? What's in it for the company? Because these days, the leadership style that in my mind is required in these days is for you to be genuine and intentional and authentic as possible. And when you're sharing what the vision is, what's in your head, what you see, what your dreams are, then it makes you more authentic and transparent. And people want to follow those kinds of leaders. They don't want to just be told.
Real quick on that though. So what if I'm like the type of leader where I'm just like, I just want to make a crap ton of money and buy a yacht? Is that the type of authenticity that people are going to rally behind? Or do I need to come up with something a little bit more, like good feeling, and do I need to pay Simon Sinek $500,000 to help me develop a why? Like, talk to me about that.
Good question. That might be one of the things that they want, but when you dig deeper, they really want something else more purposeful, much bigger than that. It might be because they want to do that because they want to have fun with their family. They want the freedom to do things with their family. That's what the yacht provides for them. Or it provides some other significance for them. And it may even start that way, but then once what their purpose is and what their why is, they may change in a certain way. That maybe that yacht isn't that important. Maybe it's just leaving the legacy in my company is more important than that. Because I've seen it, because in my TAB clients, we ask for a personal vision. And we help define that personal vision. That personal vision combines both business and personal together. And it's not just all about the business. Okay. So when we start asking about their personal vision, and that becomes the end in sight. Okay. It doesn't become the means to the end, because the business is really the means to help them to get to that end, which is their personal vision. And when we looking at that, sometimes they start with just material things, but then as they grow and evolve as a leader, those become less and less important. And then they start realizing that, family is more important. Time with their family is more important. The legacy they leave is more important. The impact they make with the community and their employees are more important. So sometimes it takes a journey to get there, but and some people get there faster than others. But I would always peel that back. As a coach, I would always peel back. So why is that yacht important to you? Okay, what does that provide you? Okay, and then you get to really understand what's driving them.
So we should actually, can we run through a test right here? I mean, I want to, I'm curious how you actually go through the process of helping somebody understand their why, because I think this is something that I struggled with in 2019. And I don't know that I've landed on anything that's like profound or amazing or anything, but yeah, I mean, how do you help business owners figure this out?
Well, we go through a series of questions. From the owner standpoint, we have a series of questions that we take them through an exercise for their personal vision. From the company standpoint, if the vision's not clear, then we go through a process that helps them really understand what that vision is. Okay, so yeah, I'm happy to ask some questions if you want me to dive deep on certain things. Yeah, I'm ready for that.
Tom,
challenge.
why do you want a yacht?
Oh, Tom wants a yacht.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want a yacht, but if I did want a yacht, it would be to be raw. It would be for power and prestige. That's why I'd want a yacht. I wouldn't want it because I like a boat. I would want it because of the power and prestige it brings.
So the power and prestige. So what kind of power and prestige are you looking for?
Yeah, it's really weird talking about this type of stuff, but yeah, I mean, okay, like the keeping up with the Joneses scenario. It's like, I want to be the Joneses, right? I don't want to be keeping up with anybody. I want people to keep up with me. I don't know. I don't even know if that's the best way to describe it. I guess maybe it's influence. Maybe.
But what does that look like to you though?
Oh,
so what does that look like to you? How do you know you've gotten there? How would you measure that? Or how do you know you've succeeded reaching that influence or that power and prestige? What does it look like?
Yeah, I guess it's like you walk into a room, right? And wow, okay, you walk into a room.
You are.
Yeah, and people know who you are, and they want to know how you got there, what you did, and they're kind of they're enamored by what you were able to achieve.
Okay, and why is that important to you?
Yeah, see, that's a good question. I don't really know that I have a good answer to that. It just is. I can't really put my finger on it.
So I'm going to sub in for Tom. All right. So it's important to me because I can influence other people and help them grow. I'm assuming it's kind of like a piece of that.
Yeah.
But it all starts from this like recognition that you could get a piece of this too. Maybe, Tom?
Yeah, I think it's more or less like, okay. Yeah. Okay. And I think part of it too is like, you want to kind of achieve to be all you can be. I think that's part of it is somewhere in there. And like part of getting there part of that would be, okay, you have the yacht because that's just a symbol of that. It just symbolizes, look what all this hard work and effort paid off to get. And to your point, you can have some too. I guess you could put it that way. Yeah.
I mean, what I heard was y'all want to impact people. You want to be able to influence so that you can help them grow and they can be better. It's really a means to get there. The yacht may be one way to get there, but there's other ways to get there. There's other ways to really help influence people and help them grow. So that's where I would start asking, and how do we peel that onion back and helping them to get to that point where they can do that in all sorts of different ways. And it doesn't have to be specifically, I mean, the yacht could still be a goal. I want to know, why is it important so we can get there? Does that make sense?
Should you be ashamed of having a yacht as your goal?
No, you shouldn't be.
Not my goal or Tom's goal, just for everybody that's listening. But I'm just curious because, I think that like there's a lot of people that sort of feel a little bit of shame of like saying, yeah, I want a monetary something, or I want the Ferrari or whatever. And I guess my question is, should that be a shameful thing?
You shouldn't be ashamed of it at all, especially if it's part of your vision. What I would just challenge is that's really not the ultimate thing they want. There's something else that they want that when they have that, it provides something else more meaningful to them internally. And that's what I want to discover. I'll work with, if that's important to them, I'll work with them to get that yacht because it's going to provide something more meaningful to them that's underlying there that's really important to them. I have members that have some of my clients, they want a ranch in Colorado. They want a house in France, and we help get them there. It's because there's other things that helps them psychologically when they're moving towards that. It's providing other things that are important to them.
Got it. And so I'm assuming like the big help of kind of uncovering this is just the ranch in Colorado is not going to keep you going in times like COVID if your business is tanking. But if you can uncover the underlying reason that you want that ranch in Colorado or whatever reason you have that as a measuring stick, that could potentially be motivating factor for you to keep trudging along. Is that why this is important? Absolutely.
And that's why we want to define this personal vision for the owner and the company vision for the leadership team crystal clear and make it in plain writing. We have them write it down and then we have them share it. Because when you start sharing it, then you become more intentional about it. And you get more held accountable when people know what your vision is and you're acting inconsistently towards that vision. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I mean, you hit it on a nail on the head there, Brandon. It's exactly.
All right. So if we switch gears just a little bit from that, one of your philosophies I saw on your website was that there's 3 key aspects of a business system. It's people, process, and infrastructure. And I know that we talked about this a little bit so far, but would you be able to just elaborate on why are those 3 pieces so important?
Yeah. So that's kind of the lens I look at business. So we talked about people already. So people, is who you are as an organization and the people that you employ, your team, and it's you as well as an owner as part of that people component. It's who creates that vision, who creates your products. So the process side of it is how, how do we do what we do with the people that we have? And then the infrastructure is really the tools that we use to process our how. Like our infrastructure could be our building, our technology, our tools, or our policies and procedures and things like that. So when you're looking at an organization, if there's an issue with the company, it's either related to a people issue or a process issue, how you're doing things, or an infrastructure issue. Because you can have great people, but if your processes stink and you don't have it systemized, you don't have processes, then you're relying a lot on your people. And you're probably holding your people back because the processes are so disjointed that they're not able to reach their potential. Or you can really have good people, good processes, but your infrastructure is really weak. So you don't have the right technology. You don't have the right space. You're not structured the right way that it makes it inefficient on how you're doing things. Then you're holding your people back as well. Or you can be so process oriented, you're not looking at the people side of things that, you're losing a big picture because you're so process oriented. You're not seeing how your people are growing or not growing. So they're all interrelated. So when I look at that, I also look at it from a business body standpoint, because my philosophy is when you look at the business, it's a body, okay, just like our human body. So the people side of it is our emotions, our mind, our intellect, our brain, and how we communicate with the rest of our body through our nervous system, okay? And then the process side of it is how our organs process things, okay? Our brain processes things, our heart, our systems process things, because you have digestive, respiratory, and cardiovascular, those kinds of systems. There's a way things get processed within our body. And our infrastructure is really our body. So we have our own, we have a heart, we have lungs, we have our body, our bones, and things like that. So when you put all that together, it's one big system. People, process, and infrastructure is one big system, just like our human body and just like business bodies. So that's why I look at it that way. Because like I said, if something's broken, it's going to be one of those issues. And sometimes we feel like it's a people issue, but it's really because it may be a process issue. Maybe we don't have the right processes or people are failing because of that. Okay. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. It absolutely makes sense. I think that we see some of the same struggles, really great people, really great talents. And sometimes, the process might be broken. Process needs to be improved so that you can really, kind of I guess, like you said, allow the people to reach their full potential, right? So I think that absolutely does make sense.
Yeah, because when I do my peer board meetings, and they bring up an issue, because we always bring up each member brings up an issue, the challenge that they're facing in their business. And so when they're bringing up an issue, I'm always putting my lens on, is this a people issue or a process issue or an infrastructure issue? Because it usually is one of those. And once we know what it is, then we start asking questions on how to dig deeper on that. Also from an EOS standpoint, because EOS has 6 key components of the business, right? It's the vision component, people, data, issues, process, and traction. So on the people side, there's a people component, but also the vision component of traction. And EOS is really the people component, because if you have people that don't have visions, then it's a people issue. And then on the process component there is a process component in EOS, but also the process of solving issues, because we have a way of solving issues specifically in EOS, and it's usually through the level 10 meeting, which is a communication tool. Okay, process for me is communication. Because if we're not communicating, then we have a breakdown in process when we're not communicating. And then when I look at the infrastructure side of things, infrastructure is the scorecard, the data component in EOS, but also the traction component in EOS, because the traction component talks about our meeting structure, talks about our meeting pulse, which is your quarterly stuff, which is a part of the infrastructure. So really, I can look at people, process, and infrastructure and tie it to EOS, tie it to what I'm doing with the alternative board. So that's kind of how I see things, regardless of what space I'm in my business. It applies to all of it.
So drilling down just a little bit into that process component, right? Let's assume that, the business has a perfect process, right? Let's assume, right? How does the business or leadership team go about making sure that the employees are properly trained on that process and make sure that they understand it, inside and out, what they're supposed to do, what their role is within that process?
Sure. So in process, we have a term called followed by all in EOS, because in a process component, first you have to document it, make sure they're documented. So assuming they're documented, it's the followed by all that's a challenge, because they may not have been trained on it. You may not be measuring it along the way to see if you're following the process. You may not be leading and managing and holding people accountable to it, and they may be outdated. So you really have to make sure that once your processes are documented, in order for it to be ingrained in your culture, first you have to communicate it. Okay, so if you communicate it, make sure everyone understands what the process is, and then you train them on it once you communicate it. And it's that ongoing training that makes sure that people are actually doing it. So you're leading them and managing them, holding people accountable, and hopefully you're measuring it along the way to see if the process is yielding the results that you want. Once you've done that, then it should be ingrained into your culture. And it becomes just an automatic thing. Just like whenever we're doing any kind of thing that we want to be an expert in, we're always repeating things to make sure that we're doing it right. So if it's in sports, we're doing things. If it's in martial arts, if it's in anything that we want to be an expert in, if it's in presenting, we redo things in repetition to make sure that it imprints it in our head. So it goes back to our body. Our business body is just like a human body. In order for us to learn as a business body, we have to repeat things so it gets imprinted in our brain, so it becomes automatic, so we don't even have to think about it. Okay, and so when we're doing that time and time again as an organization with our processes, then we're able to make repeatable processes, and then we can do much higher value things with our clients, because not everything's a fire, and not everything has to be reinvented. When we're working with our clients, we can have higher value. We can add higher value when things that are automatic are just happening. And then we can focus on those exceptions, which should be very little, to really increase our customer service when we run into exceptions, because exceptions shouldn't be the norm. The things that should be process oriented and systematic should be easy and automatic, so we can actually address those exceptions with a much higher value with our clients.
So there's a lot of great information in there, and I've got a lot of questions. So what is the best way to write processes down? I mean, are we creating a guidebook? Are we creating video trainings? What do you mean when you say write processes down or get your systems in writing?
So we always start high level, okay? And again, I'm going to insert some EOS language here. So in EOS, when we say document your processes, we always use a 20-80 rule, kind of like the Pareto rule, right? So we always ask for documenting 20% of the steps. That's going to get you 80% of the result. Okay. Because sometimes when you're documenting 100% of the steps to get to that additional 20% of the result that you want, it's not worth it. It just takes too much time and effort. People can say, no, we can't start anything until we document everything. No, you still have a business to run. You got to keep going. So get to the 20%. That's going to get you to 80% of the result. And when you do that across all your whole entire organization, across all your core processes, then you see the big picture. You start seeing where the handoffs are. You see where the gaps are. And people don't get lost into the details and too much into the step-by-step approach, because when you do that, people are not going to follow it anyway. And then all of a sudden, you're worried about rev control because it's so detailed. Any minor change that happens, you have to change the document, and it just becomes a documenting nightmare. And so we always focus on the 20% of the steps that's going to get you to 80% of the results. So that's what we want. And if you want to go in more detail, then you can have references that reference from the 20 steps, the 20% of the steps. You can have references from there that allows more details, whether it's a checklist or a certain step-by-step approach. And so that way, we still don't lose sight of the bigger picture, because those references might change, those tools might change on how you do it, but what you're doing and why you're doing it doesn't change, which is that 20%.
Got it. And do you recommend like documenting this in Google Drive, or is there a software that you recommend using?
I don't recommend any specific software because they have so many different ways to do that. And so really it depends on the preference of whoever's documenting it and who's following it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of tools out there.
So you document 20% of the processes that are going to get you 80% of the results. So you're really just focused on your hardest hitting, highest value or most repeatable processes, I guess. Or regardless, you're getting processes down on paper. Now, how do you go and train your staff? Because you mentioned, you communicate and then you train, but then you also threw in there that you have continuous training. So how do you really get people to move from wherever they're at to adoption of these new processes that you've worked hard on documenting?
I mean, one of the best ways is for them to teach you or teach others once they've learned it, once you've communicated with them, once you've trained them on your own and know that they're doing it well, then you get them to teach others on how to do it. That's just, one way of doing it is to make sure that they're actually absorbing what you're teaching them by them teaching others as well. And also, if there's ways to measure it along the way, that's the best way to know if people are actually following the process, is if you can actually measure some milestones along the way or trigger points that tells you things are moving along the way they should be. And that's where a lot of different practice management tools or process management tools are handy when that comes into play.
Yes. A quick follow-up question I have on this is, we've talked about this before here on the show, and we'll get to the challenges in just a second. But when you're dealing with, say, a group of people that have been ingrained in a way of doing things, they have their habit loops, right? And how do you get them to have the open-mindedness enough to actually go ahead and change? Because if you implement new processes, for example, it could be very difficult for people to change. So how do you get people to actually accept that change?
That's a good question. So in order for people to accept change, they have to see the value and the benefit for that change, right? So if there's something that they're doing that's not working and it's not producing results, and the vision is crystal clear on where they want to go as an organization, and they're on board with that vision and they understand the why behind what they're doing, they're more open to changing. I had a conference last week, and there was a really good quote. People don't fear change. People fear on what you're doing to them to make them change. Okay, because they're more open to change if they know the why behind it. But if you're trying to make them change and forcing change and they don't understand the why behind it, that's what they fear the most, because they see uncertainty. They don't know why they're changing or what it's going to result, and if there's any hidden agendas behind that. But if you are clear with the vision and the why for that change, people will embrace that change, because naturally people want to grow and they want to be better and they want to improve. Okay, and they want to be part of a team that does that. So you just have to be really clear on what that why is and communicate it.
Got it. So in summary, you have to be able to show your vision and basically why what's currently being done is not getting to that vision. And then here's the process that will actually get us there, kind of in summary.
Yeah, and you have to have them be part of that change, because they may have some suggestions that you've never thought of or the leadership team hasn't thought of. So if they're part of the solution, they're more on board with that change.
That makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. You want to get the people's buy-in, right? Mm-hmm. So we are coming up here on time soon, and we ask this question to everybody who comes on this show, and that is: has there been any specific challenges that you faced, as you were going along your business journey, that almost made you say, "Hey, look, I'm going to give up on this entire business thing and go back to a W-2 job"? Have you ever had any challenges that made you think that before?
Man, yeah. I mean, that's gone through my head several times in this, 10, almost 11-year journey. Let me see, a specific thing. I mean, this recent one, this recent COVID scenario has definitely made me think. I don't know if I completely went that direction where I thought, okay, I'm giving it all up. I'd rather just be an employee, but it definitely made me stress out. Maybe put me in a depression for a period of time, because we were down at one point in time about 75% of our business. And we just invested in this building here. And all of a sudden we couldn't meet in this building. And the whole idea was to meet in person. And then everyone started going with virtual, and some people didn't want to go virtual. And so just meetings started getting pushed back. And so we saw our revenues take a dip for probably a 2-month period of 75% down. It's like, what are we doing? What are we going to do? So it really challenged us to see, okay, how do we make this work? How can we pivot? I know we can solve this, but before I got to that point, I was not a happy person. I was stressed out. I was, wondering what to do with my team, how to help my clients in the best way possible. But once I calmed down and took a deep breath, and I started talking to my team and expressing my concerns, and I started talking about solutions, and it got me out of that dip, and really started seeing, okay, this is what we can do. This is what we can control. This is what we can't control. Let's focus on these other things, and let's serve our clients in the best way possible, because when we do that, it all turns out great at the end. So that was a challenge these past months, and it was pretty scary in the months of April and May, starting the end of March, but April and May are pretty scary times here.
I think that's a really good perspective, though. I think that the first reaction is always emotional. Even if you're the most logical person in the world, there's always an emotional reaction, and a lot of that can be fear. But what you talked about was sitting down, coming up with a plan, and just, now I've got the plan to execute. And that's actually something that I learned going through COVID as well, being a business owner. I've never been through a dip as a business owner. So this was all brand new to me. And I have a coach who we've interviewed on one of the previous episodes of Staying Power, Coach Jeff. And I called him up when all this was going down initially in March. And he was just like, calm down, sit down, write a plan out, include financial numbers, and, basically say, when we hit this mark, these things are going to happen. When we hit that mark minus 20%, these things are going to happen. When we hit that mark minus 20%, these things are going to happen. And you just do that. And now you've got your plan. And now you don't have to worry about coming up with a plan. Now you just have to worry about trying to sell and remain relevant while the economy is crashing, right? Which is still a very big thing. Yep. But it just kind of alleviates the stress, because you've got the plan in front of you, and mine was hanging on the wall. Got the plan right there. So every week we're looking at our numbers. We're looking at our metrics. Where are we at? Okay, we're above plan. We're good. We don't have to do anything. Next week, we're getting closer to plan. Next week, we're still good. But you just know that you've stepped through it logically. You've stepped through it in a very smart manner, unemotional manner, and you just follow the plan. That helped me kind of remove the whole idea that COVID was going on and just try to figure out where are the opportunities that my team can still flourish here, versus being in a fear reactionary based mindset. So anyway, it sounds like you kind of did something really similar, and I just wanted to share my experience with that.
No, thanks for sharing that. And it kind of helps kind of, what I did was, I went to the tools and resources that I provide my clients, right? So I have a peer group that I get wisdom from. I have a business coach. We run our business on EOS. So we use the tools for that. So all those things really helped us, get better and improve and look ahead and not be, like you said, reactionary, but more proactive on control of things that we can't control, have a plan and execute that plan. So you can't go at it alone. And that's why I'm in business, because business owners, they thrive when they have other business owners to talk to, and they thrive when they have a system that they can follow. They can have open and honest conversation with their leadership team. So I just went back to the tools that I always preach, and they work. So thankfully, I like to say that I'm humble enough to know when I don't know what I need to do, and I can go to the resources that can help me out. So in addition to my awesome team that I have here.
Don, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. You certainly learned a lot about the EOS system and how to overcome some of these challenges business owners face as they kind of grow their businesses. If our listeners wanted to learn more about you or JDSM, how would they be able to do so?
Sure. Thank you for that. So they can go to my website. It's called JDSMenterprises.com, or if it's easier to remember, tractiontohealthy.com, tractiontohealthy.com. And they can find me there. So, and they can find me on LinkedIn too. So Don Maranca at LinkedIn, and you can see my profile there.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on the show today. Looking forward to putting this one out there.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me on board. And I appreciate the questions, and hopefully I was helpful to your audience.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes and share the show with other business owners who may be facing their own growth challenges. And if you own a professional services firm, consider joining our private community. The Staying Power Collective is a community where owners of accounting, law, and consulting firms discuss best practices for running and growing virtual businesses. You'll get access to our Slack group, and you'll have a Zoom meeting once a month with a small group of other firm owners. To apply for the group, head on over to www.stayingpowercollective.com and fill out the brief form. And if you have suggestions for future topics or guests, or if you have general questions or feedback, send us an email at contact@stayingpowercollective.com. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great rest of your week.